where we're going to be exploring the wonderful state of Kentucky. So this is going to be a real treat, I know. So make yourself comfortable. Feel free to say hello in the chat box. We always want to know who's joining us and where from. Sadly, I haven't got a bourbon tonight. I did raid my cupboards and couldn't find one. But if you have a bourbon, get yourself in the mood, pour yourself one. And if you haven't got a bourbon to hand, then get yourself a nice cool drink anyway. So, we'll just wait for a few more people to join. As I say, do say hello. And then we'll kick off once we've got a few more people in. And Jackie from Burnham is first in the chat box. I used to live in Burnham, Jackie. So welcome. Welcome to Sabine from Belgium. So, guys, we get a very international crowd joining, and including from Scotland, Douglas. So, yes, commiserations on the football, not in Douglas, but thank you for joining us. And, Michael and Exeter, hi, Sassy, who's being mysterious where she is. So, yes, do say hello. Lovely to have you all joining us. Barbara's in Portugal. Doug's in Iowa. So, yes, I wondered if we'd get somebody joining us from the US of A. So make yourself comfortable, get yourself a drink, and in a few minutes we can start talking Kentucky. Really looking forward to this one because I must admit it's a terrible admission, Mike, but I've not yet been to Kentucky. Emphasis on the yet. So really looking forward to hearing more. Welcome to Jane in Kent and Jean in Alaska. Suzanne in Austin, Texas, who's heading to Louisville. Did you say Louisville or Louisville?
Louisville. Actually, Louisville. we say Louisville, so it's a whole different way of saying it.
Oh, God, Louisville. Right, okay. Oh, gosh. Margaret in the Wirral, Henry from Pimlico, Lucy in Harrogate. So, yes, say hello. Pamela says from sunny Kent. Yeah, it is sunny this evening here in Windsor as well. But what miserable weather us British have had recently. So, it's been very frustrating. So we'll just give it another minute or two, and then I can say hello to our speakers. In fact, we have had, Mike, we've had such miserable weather in the UK. So what's the weather like over there in Kentucky?
Well, it's beautiful and sunny. It's a little hot. It's we usually don't get this kind of heat until mid-July or August, but just gives you another reason to check out all of our wonderful water that we have here, lakes and streams and houseboating and things that we'll talk about here in just a little bit.
Oh, that sounds nice. I think, Kath, we can only dream of that, can't we? Where are you this evening?
I'm very envious of Mike. That's where I am. I'm here in sunny, it is sunny at least, West London, in our offices here. I'm wishing like you that I had a bourbon in my hands, because it's definitely bourbon o'clock somewhere.
It is definitely, yes. And Mike, this is our first sunny evening in a bit. So, welcome.
Calls for a celebration with a bourbon anytime, sure.
Absolutely.
Of course, breakfast
get us in the mood.
Breakfast right. Here is for a bourbon, so that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Right, Doug is asking, will this going to be available for replay? It is, Doug. So, yes, we'll forgive you if you do have to leave before the end. So, as ever, it's available on replay. We'll also be sending out an email in the next few days. It will have any useful information and links from tonight, and it will also have the recording in it. So you'll be able to watch the recording then. And that recording will also be on our website and our YouTube channel. So, so you'll be able to, if anybody does need to go a bit early, we will be able to, you will be able to catch up on that. So please don't fret. Equally, so if you've got any questions this evening, because we should have time for a Q&A at the end, do ask in the chat box any questions, and we'll try and get onto those. If we can't get onto them, we will again have those in the follow-up email. So do get those questions coming, and we look forward to getting those. So, we'll kick off in a second. So, this evening, then, what is going to happen is we are delighted to welcome Mike Manjit from the Kentucky Department of Tourism. Mike's commissioner there, and I know that he is passionate about his home state. So, I've had a bit of an insight into that. So, yes, really looking forward to hearing more. I know we're all going to be wanting to go when Mike finishes. And after Mike, we'll be hearing from Kath Pusey, who's the product director of America As You Like It, who are a smashing UK tour operator. And as the name suggests, they specialise in the United States. And we've worked with them before, and we know they have great trips, really imaginative trips. So we are always delighted to partner with them on anything appropriate. So that's what's going to happen this evening. And then after that, as I say, we're going to have a Q&A. So please do send your questions in. Right. And Mike, also, what time is it there anyway?
It is 1:35 Eastern time in the afternoon. So if I weren't in my office, trust me, I'd be sharing a bourbon with you right now.
Yes. Oh gosh, I bet. Okay, well, I think we might as well kick off then. So, Mike, we'll hand over to you, and look forward to hearing more about Kentucky.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Wanderlust, for having us. It's always so much fun for us to be able to come on and talk about our beautiful state. One thing I'll start off with saying is Kentucky's a surprise for a lot of folks. We realize that we're, unless you're coming over for visit business or on business rather, or visit friends and relatives, we're usually not going to be the first stop for an international visitor. They're going to hit the gateways, but after they've done that a couple of times, they want to see true America and authentic Americana. I think nobody beats Kentucky at all. So what we want to do is kind of walk you through a little bit of what we're known for, including some of our iconic cities, our bluegrass music. Of course, we can't talk about Kentucky without talking about bourbon, which we've already done, and I'll delve a little bit further into that for you. Our barbecue and our culinary aspects as well. It's really a thriving scene here from the culinary standpoint. Some of those hidden treasures that I mentioned, I can't tell you how many times when I talk to visitors, and even in our research that we show, what people say is, I was so surprised by how beautiful Kentucky it is. The types of experiences I could have, whether it was a family experience, whether it was a luxury couples weekend, and of course the friendliness and hospitality of the people. So we're going to get into all of that a little bit today, but to really kind of kick us off, what I wanted to do and give you a sense of what Kentucky looks like, how bourbon is integrated into everything that we do. I want you to watch a very short video that we produced with Brand USA, and I'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
There's a great legacy of people going to the United States, whether that's for adventure, whether that's for new careers, new lives. It's many things. And for this is an adventure for me. Growing up in Dublin, where everyone knows your name and where everyone knows your uncle's name, and actually they went to school with your cousin, it's amazing to be somewhere that no one knows who you are, but you're about to meet them. My time during the Bourbon Trail, we were blessed with beautiful weather. We had days where sunlight seemed to just cast down upon our face and warm us from dawn till dusk. And everyone we met would hold us in the palms of their hands, whether they welcomed us in to greet us as friends or as people teaching us something about these fields of this grain, of this whiskey, this barrel, this cask, this space. It was beautiful. At home, whiskey is my grandfather's drink and my father's drink, not my brother's drink. So it became mine. Incredible landscape that we were in the walks, listening to the wind rattle through the trees and hearing birdsong in the morning as the sun is rising and the warmth sort of, softens your bones. In these vast spaces with this huge sky, we met storyteller after storyteller after storyteller. And it reminds me of sharing a glass with my father, with my grandfather, with my uncles, and probably then having a song at the end of the night. But here on the Bourbon Trail, no one sang us a song, but everybody told us a story. I could go to any place, say hello to someone behind the bar, ask them for a bourbon, ask them why that bourbon is their favorite, and hear their story. I wanted to see where those nights would take us, whether they would be one short drink or whether it would continue on to new places and new experiences. And the reason why whiskey at home matters to me is because it reminds me of where I was and who was there that poured my first glass. Those people are the people that have informed my love of this. And so meeting people who make it the reason why they love it. It's definitely been one of the best experiences of my life.
So hopefully that gives you a sampling of what Kentucky has to offer. And as we go through this, one of the first questions I like to answer, and I get from a lot of folks, is how do I even get to Kentucky? And you see on this map, there's Kentucky. We consider ourselves the front door to the southern part of the United States. We have a direct flight right now on British Airways out of Heathrow into our northern Kentucky, Cincinnati Airport. You see at the very top of Kentucky, the city of Covington. That's actually my hometown where I was born. And in the video, you may have noticed we also showed Nashville, Tennessee, and Cincinnati, Ohio. We show that because we border 7 U.S. states. Only Tennessee borders more. We're within a day's drive of 2/3 of the population of the United States. From a connecting flight standpoint, flights of less than 1 hour from Chicago, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Nashville to Bowling Green, which is one of our bigger cities in the southern part of the state, is under an hour drive. So we're very easy to connect with, a great part of a fly drive itinerary, whether you're coming into the south or north and driving down. To give you an idea that a drive from Chicago to Louisville is about 5 hours. And it's a great itinerary if you want to investigate Abraham Lincoln, who, while Illinois calls himself the land of Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky, and his birthplace is a National Historic Landmark that you can visit. So this just kind of gives you a sense of where we are. Traveling between our towns is very simple. We have a great road system and very beautiful as well. So I want to talk a little bit about what is iconic about Kentucky. You see the photos here. That is historic Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville is our largest town in Kentucky. It is the home of Churchill Downs and the home of the Kentucky Derby. Now, most of you hopefully have heard of the Kentucky Derby. It is the longest continuously held sporting event in the United States. Just celebrated its 150th consecutive running. So it is run through pandemics. It is run through wars. It is run through everything for the last 150 years. But some folks think that is the only race that day. It is not. There's actually usually 14 races on the card that day. And here in Kentucky, we have horse racing about 360 days a year. We have multiple horse tracks spread around the state: Kentucky Downs and Henderson, Keeneland and Lexington, which I'll talk about in just a second. But Keeneland is probably my favorite track. But the Derby is certainly a bucket list item for a lot of folks. But you can go, and Churchill has most of our race dates, I will say that, in Louisville. But there's always running horses running somewhere in Kentucky. I'll put it that way. And even if you go to Churchill Downs when they aren't running, you can visit the Kentucky Derby Museum, which is on site, which is a fantastic museum with experiences that showcase not just the history of horse racing, but the history of African Americans in horse racing. They just opened a new history of African American influence on horse racing at the museum, women, etc. So it's a fantastic location. If you like baseball, the iconic Louisville Slugger baseball bat, museum and factory is also in downtown Louisville. It's very easily spotted by the 36-meter tall baseball bat against the building. Yes, it is a perfect social media site there. Louisville's also the home to Muhammad Ali, and a lot of folks I don't think realize that. And a few years previously, prior to the champ passing away, he opened his Muhammad Ali Center and Museum in downtown Louisville. Certainly something that you can't miss. Doesn't just focus on his boxing career. The majority of the museum actually focuses on his civil rights work, his work around the globe as a goodwill ambassador. In Lexington is about 90 minutes to the east of Louisville. It is our second largest town. It is considered the horse capital of the world. The key attractions there is the Kentucky Horse Park, which is a 1,400-acre park dedicated to all breeds of horses. The Museum of the Horse is located there. It's host to many events, not thoroughbred related specifically, but things like the Land Rover 3-day event, which is an Olympic qualifier, and we have riders from all over the world come to that. In 2010, it hosted the World Equestrian Games, the first time that event was ever held outside of Europe, or held in North America. Keeneland, I mentioned, which is an iconic race course. It is my favorite. It runs in September and October, which are two of the best months to be in Kentucky. It's much smaller, more intimate than Churchill Downs. And it's a fantastic place to visit and a great afternoon. Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, was born in Lexington, Kentucky as well, and you can visit her home there as well. Some of their big events, Festival of the Bluegrass, which is a big bluegrass music event, which is held in June of every year, and Railbird, which is a relatively new music festival. If you don't know what Railbird means, Railbird is someone who goes to the track often and sits on the rail all day, right by the horses. So Railbird Music Festival just occurred a couple of weeks ago, also held in June in Lexington at one of our racetracks, the Red Mile. And it was headlined by, if you like country music, you're familiar with Chris Stapleton, who was born in Eastern Kentucky. Moving north, I mentioned Covington earlier, and Covington is my birthplace. It is right on the Ohio River, directly across from Cincinnati, Ohio. A lot of key attractions there. Mainstrasse Village, which is really a German-focused recreation of a village in downtown Covington. Covington has a very strong German Catholic heritage, and it has a big impact there. They have a very large Oktoberfest festival. The first official Hofbrauhaus, I believe, in the United States is located nearby in Newport, Kentucky, which is just literally right next door to Covington, just down about 5 minutes away. In Newport, something interesting to know about Newport is there's a very large entertainment center there called Newport on the Levee. But when I was growing up in northern Kentucky, Newport at that time was actually the second largest gambling mecca outside of Las Vegas in the United States. When people like Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe and others didn't want to go to Vegas, they came to Newport, and now there's actually a really cool gangster tour that you can take through Newport. So if you come in, I would recommend that. And then the Roebling Suspension Bridge, which you'll see a photo of in just a second. John Roebling designed this bridge. It was a model for probably his most famous work, and you should see the similarities, which was the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. Moving on to Bardstown, Kentucky. Bardstown is considered the bourbon capital of the world. It's a very small town. In 2014 was named the most beautiful small town in America by Rand McNally in USA Today. It's the home to my old Kentucky home state park, which was an estate and was the inspiration for our state song, My Old Kentucky Home, which is played before every Kentucky Derby. It's also, why is it the bourbon capital of the world? It's a town of 14,000 people, and has 11 distilleries within 15 minutes of there. Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, Bardstown Bourbon Company. So many of those. In fact, 70% of all the bourbon in the world that is currently aging and being produced is within 15 minutes of Bardstown. So this kind of give you a quick visual snapshot of some of those areas. On the left, that is downtown Louisville. That is the 21C Museum. And yes, that is a 3.5-story tall replica of the Statue of David in gold plate. 21C Museum is a very kitschy, I guess, place to visit. It's fantastic luxury accommodations, but it also is a world-class art museum with rotating exhibits, fantastic restaurant, and really right in the heart of downtown Louisville. The middle shot you see there is one of our newer attractions. It's called the Rail Finders in Versailles, Kentucky, just outside of Lexington. You actually ride on old train tracks like that, and you pedal through some of those iconic fences and horse farms, by those black rail fences, I should say, that you see throughout Central Kentucky. Keep in mind, Central Kentucky, as horse capital of the world, has 450 working horse farms. When I was growing up, you couldn't visit those, but now you can. You can take guided tours through those. It's fascinating to see how the horses are treated, how they live, and it's just obviously incredibly beautiful as well. And then there on the right, you see the Roebling Bridge that I mentioned earlier. And as you can see, has a lot of similarities to the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. So one of the other things that we're are known for is we are the home and birthplace of bluegrass music. Bluegrass music was really introduced by a gentleman named Bill Monroe, who's known as the father of bluegrass. He was born in a very small town called Rosine, Kentucky, in western Kentucky near Owensboro. Bill had a band called the Bluegrass Boys, and his style of music they called the high lonesome sound. He specialized and played the mandolin, and he became famous as a repeat performer on the Grand Ole Opry in the 30s. And people would say, "I want to hear some of that music by those Bluegrass Boys." And then the genre of music became known as bluegrass. In Owensboro, is the photo you see here, is the Bluegrass Music Museum, Hall of Fame and Museum, which is an incredible interactive experience for you. You see those instruments on the wall. You can actually go in, pick one of those up, and play a little if you want. Sit down and do a little jam session with folks who are coming in on that. Of course, we have some fantastic bluegrass music festivals. I mentioned already the Festival of the Bluegrass in Lexington, which occurred just a couple of weeks ago. And the Romp Music Festival, which is held in Owensboro, is coming up in late June, which is when it's always held. From a modern scene, the bluegrass music in Kentucky has such an impact. An artist named Sam Bush, who came out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, actually incorporated some new sounds. Usually bluegrass music has a stand-up bass fiddle or a guitar, a banjo, a mandolin, and a fiddle. But he brought in some electric elements as well, and it's just a really cool twist on bluegrass. But beyond bluegrass music, Kentucky has really, I think, an unheralded music heritage. And when you start naming the folks who have come out of Kentucky and the impact that they've had on bluegrass, I'm sorry, not just bluegrass, but all music genres. Loretta Lynn, who many people call the queen of country music, was born in Butcher Holler, Kentucky, in East Kentucky, and her home place is now a museum that you can visit. Huge impact on Kentucky. You mentioned Bill Monroe. Artists like Patti Loveless, Dwight Yoakam, Billy Ray Cyrus, the Everly Brothers. A lot of folks don't realize the Everly Brothers and their family are from a town called Central City in western Kentucky, in Muhlenberg County. And I mention that specifically because if you're a fan of John Prine music, John Prine has a song called Paradise. And he talks about taking back to Muhlenberg County, laying down by the Rochester Dam. There's now a John Prine Memorial Park there. And just on this past Friday in Central City, they dedicated some statues, life-size statues of both the Everly Brothers and Mr. Prine. If you're a fan of contemporary music, I already mentioned Chris Stapleton, but Carly Pierce, who is, I don't know if she's the reigning CMA Female Vocalist of the Year, but she won it recently, is from Northern Kentucky. And then Tyler Childers and some others are really making a huge impact on the music scene. How we kind of tie all this together, I mentioned some of the other music festivals we have. There's one coming up in Louisville, our largest, called Bourbon and Beyond, and that is in late September. And their headliners this year, to give you an idea, now they're not all from Kentucky, but the headliners for this, and it's now in its 4th year, are Neil Young, Beck, Dave Matthews Band, Tyler Childers, who I mentioned. You've got Maren Morris playing. You've got Melissa Etheridge playing. You've got the Beach Boys playing. You have artists from all genres coming, and they will expect about 100,000 people over 4 days for that concert series of concerts and event. And of course, they incorporate bourbon into that extensively. And here's another snapshot of some folks walking into the museum and doing a little jam session, the Romp Festival. And if you don't know what a mandolin is, that's what it is right there on the right. So took me long enough to really start talking about bourbon, but let's start talking about our bourbon culture here. Bourbon has to be made in the United States. In 1964, Congress passed a law that made bourbon America's native spirit. Similar to champagne, which can only come from the Champagne region of France, bourbon can only come from the United States of America. Most people think bourbon has to be made in Kentucky, and I don't do anything to dissuade people of that notion. If you want it to be good bourbon, I say it has to be made in Kentucky. And let me tell you a little bit about how important this is to us. We make 95% of all the bourbon in the world. 95%. I did not misspeak. We make 100% of all the good bourbon in the world. Currently, we have 13.6 million barrels of bourbon aging. To put that in perspective, we have 4.5 million people who live in the state. So we say we're going to put about 3 barrels up per person, and we're going to sell the rest to y'all. But the great thing about bourbon over the last 10 to 15 years and what's happened is our distilleries have embraced the visitor experience. They have invested millions and millions of dollars in the visitor experience. We now have distilleries like Log Still and just outside of Bardstown that has an amphitheater that has live music all on the weekends all summer long. We have culinary restaurants coming in. The Bardstown Bourbon Company has a world-class restaurant. They have cocktail experiences where you can come in, you can bottle your own bourbon, you can sample, taste, say I like this one, and bottle your own bourbon and take it home with you. You can follow a distiller around for a day. You can have a cocktail class. It's just amazing what you can do now when it comes to bourbon. I mentioned that 13.6 million barrels, and something that I always try to put that in perspective. So a barrel holds, I think it's 6,740 ounces of bourbon. There's 25.4 ounces in a fifth of bourbon. If you break that down by how much is aging, that means we currently have aging 3.6 billion with a B, billion bottles of bourbon. That equals 92 billion 1 ounce shots. And if you stacked up a 1 ounce shot glass with all those 92 billion, yes, I've done the math on this. I'm a nerd, sorry. That's over 5.5 million kilometers, or equal to 7 round trips to the moon. So we've got plenty of bourbon, and we welcome you to come in and experience it. Now, one thing I'll tell you, we don't really market, and it's going to sound funny with what I just said, but we don't really market the consumption of bourbon. It really is the stories, the culture around this. We now, because of the bourbon culture and how it has impacted us, we have now new hotels coming online. A lot of our restaurants are incorporating bourbon into their menus and that bourbon experience. But being able to have a cocktail, whether you like bourbon or not, or go in and hear the stories of each of these master distillers, understanding how Jim Beam, after Prohibition, had his distillery back up and running in 90 days. Understand the relationship between Jim Beam and Maker's Mark, because the families are cousins. Understanding just how they support one another, even though they're incredibly fierce competitors for shelf space, but it really is a rather small community, and they get along very well. Market collectively as the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, so there are curated bourbon experiences throughout this. A number of companies here that can book tours for you, take you to each of these distilleries. And then again, just a very quick visual snapshot. On the left, you see that is at one of the cooperages. So part of the rules of bourbon is that it must be aged in a new white oak barrel. Each of the bourbon's distillers usually char the inside of that barrel. One thing to keep in mind also, or why they do that, is because 100% of the color of that bourbon that you see on the right there comes from that barrel. In bourbon, you cannot add any type of color or flavor at all by law. So 100% of the color comes in by aging in that barrel here in Kentucky. Kentucky's an ideal place for bourbon for a couple of reasons. One, our water. We sit on a limestone shelf here. It's a natural filtration system. It takes iron out of the water. You can't make good whiskey with iron in the water. Two is we have 4 distinct seasons here in Kentucky. Gets cold in the winters, gets hot in the summers. Over time, when it's cold, that whiskey goes into the barrel through that char level. In the summer, it pushes it back out. That back and forth through that char over the however long it ages gives it 100% of that color. That middle shot is the inside of one of our warehouses, or rick houses, or rack houses, depending on what you call it. When you come into bourbon country, you'll come to the distilleries and you'll see multiples of these out there. Each one of those holds about 58,000 barrels of bourbon. So this was the part I was trying to hold off on because I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten lunch, and this is going to make me very hungry. Kentucky is known for our barbecue. I mentioned earlier our culinary scene is really growing with some really fantastic chefs. But barbecue is kind of where it all started. So we have 2 types of barbecue in Kentucky. In the Eastern Kentucky version, the primary meat is pork. Be similar to what you might see maybe in a South Carolina or North Carolina. In Western Kentucky, though, they use mutton. And that is very unique in the barbecue world. Places like Moonlight Barbecue, Old Hickory Barbecue are probably 2 of the most famous. Those are in Owensboro in Western Kentucky, same place as the Bluegrass Music Museum and Hall of Fame. Here's some other feasts. There is in Louisville. The Rib Liquor Smoke Shack is in Glasgow, Kentucky, which is South Central Kentucky. You see the Sorted sign up there. If you're familiar with Sorted Foods, we worked with them and through Brand USA, and they did a trip across Kentucky sampling all of our culinary attractions, and I would highly recommend you check that out on their YouTube page. It also gives you a great shot of the different locations in Kentucky and our culinary scene. We're very big on festivals in Kentucky. We have the International Barbecue Festival, which is the second weekend in May. So we have the Kentucky Derby, which is always the first Saturday in May, and that second weekend is the International Barbecue Festival. In Owensboro, you got the Smokin' Summer Series, which is a music festival or music and barbecue throughout the summer. In Henderson, which is another one of our river towns, and you got Northern Kentucky. It's not listed here, but right, literally at the foot of the Roebling Bridge is a place called Smoke Justice, which is not only a great bourbon bar, but some of the best barbecue I've had in my life. So a lot of opportunities to have barbecue throughout Kentucky. And it's fantastic and really nothing like you've seen it before or tried before. Shot of Moonlight Barbecue there and what that would look like. So if you're not familiar with Kentucky and our history, we were really discovered or credited with an explorer named Daniel Boone, who when he came through the Cumberland Gap, looked out on the grasslands down from the mountains and said, heaven must be a Kentucky kind of place. People tend to forget that Kentucky was the western frontier of the United States for a long time. There are a lot of firsts here in Kentucky. The first university west of the Appalachian Mountains at Transylvania University in Lexington, still operational today. The first archdiocese in the United States outside of Boston and New York was in Bardstown, Kentucky, which is now the bourbon capital of the world. So we had a lot of firsts. Because of that, we were also influenced by a lot of different cultures. I mentioned, obviously, I've talked about distilling quite a bit here, but I mentioned, we had Irish, Scottish, English settlers coming through, all bringing that understanding of distillation. where they were used to producing it with rye. The abundant crop here was corn, which is why one of the laws of bourbon is it must be at least 51% corn. But you see, I mentioned earlier that heritage of German Catholic heritage in northern Kentucky, and really all along our northern border. Our entire northern border is made up of the Ohio River, which is actually property of Kentucky. But you see it from Augusta, which is a small town in northeastern Kentucky, to the Newport and Covington area, down to Louisville, down to Owensboro, Henderson, and all the way down West Kentucky in a town called Paducah. Paducah we haven't talked about today, but Paducah is a fantastic town. It is a UNESCO city of creative fiber arts. It's home to the International Quilt Museum. They have a quilt festival every April, and it's phenomenal. These quilts are works of art. These are not the types of quilts that my grandmother made and we sat on the end of the bed. But I would recommend that you check out Paducah as well. So one thing, and one of the things that I haven't really talked about much is our outdoor activities. Kentucky is about 65% forested, so there are outdoor opportunities galore. I mentioned the water earlier. Kentucky actually has more moving and navigable water, meaning you can get a boat on it, you can recreate on it, more than any state with the exception of Alaska. And that's a huge surprise to folks. So I mentioned the Ohio River as our northern border. You see here on the left-hand side, that is Cumberland Falls, which they call the Niagara of the South. At certain times of the year when it's cloudless, I'll say, and there's a full moon, it's one of the only places in the northern hemisphere where you can actually see a moonbow, which is a rainbow at night. So it's very cool, and you can actually kayak right up near those falls or hike out pretty close to them as well. One of our lakes, Lake Cumberland, which is the largest body of water contained in Kentucky, has about 1,255 miles of coast. The entire coast of Florida is 970 something miles. So massive room. So one of the big activities here in the summer is what's called houseboating. If you're not familiar with that, you can actually rent a boat with about 5 or 6 bedrooms on it. Some of them have hot tubs. Some of them actually even have gas fireplaces on them. Don't worry, you don't have to drive it. They'll take you out. They'll tie you up and come get you. But it's a great opportunity to get out on the water. In our eastern part of the state is the Red River Gorge and the Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area, as well as the Cumberland Gap. Red River Gorge is one of the best rock climbing and hiking spots in the eastern part of the United States. I mentioned earlier that we have the limestone here and sandstone. Did you know that Kentucky has the second most sandstone arches in the country, only trailing Utah? The difference is ours are out in the mountains and in the forest, and you have to find them. But it's a great walk to go find those. So I mentioned earlier the Abraham Lincoln birthplace. And one thing that a lot of folks don't realize is Mammoth Cave National Park. Mammoth Cave National Park is located just north of Bowling Green, Kentucky. It is the longest mapped cave system in the world, with more than 400 miles of caves actually mapped. Now, you can get really down and dirty and walk through those if you want. That is not for me. I get a little claustrophobic. But they have other tours, as you see right there in the photo, that are very easy and very walkable. And actually, when you get inside some of these caves, the space is massive. They actually used to hold, in the 1920s and 30s, they would actually hold radio broadcasts and concerts inside some of these chambers. So it really is just an amazing place. It's also, Mammoth Cave National Park is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So a couple of the hidden gems as I'm about, sorry, let me stop there for a second. You see here, you can actually, yes, they're kayaking in an underground river in a cave. That's the gorge underground in the Red River Gorge. You see the hiking trail, and you get some of the colors here. I've always said I want to run an ad in New York City, a billboard with a photo of Eastern Kentucky in the fall, and say it's just like Vermont, but with bourbon. I haven't pulled that one off yet, but I'm thinking about it. And then on the right-hand, that's the entrance into Mammoth Cave. So some great outdoor activities. As I'm wrapping up, a couple of things that I want to talk to you about, some hidden gems that we didn't get to talk about. Bowling Green, Kentucky, as I mentioned, about 45 minutes north of Nashville, is also the home for the America's sports car, the Corvette. Since 1981, every Corvette in the world has been built in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Just across from the plant, which you can tour, but just across from the plant is the National Corvette Museum, which, if you're an automotive fan or not, it's truly a spectacle to go in and see all the different versions of Corvettes and how they've changed over the years. And if you're really a daredevil, across the interstate from both the plant and the museum owns what's called the National Motorsports Park, which is a world-class test track. And guess what? You can go in and you can drive a Corvette on that track. I did it, and it was one of the most terrifyingly fun things I've ever done. So we had a great time. As I'm wrapping up here, I wouldn't invite you to check out this video series that we did called Fireside Fortune. I mentioned earlier that Kentucky is a surprise. So what we wanted to do is we brought a family down from Chicago. They didn't know what they were doing. None of them had ever been to Kentucky before. They didn't know what they were doing. And we had them here for a week and gave them a series of adventures to look at. And it was a lot of fun. So you can download it with that QR code or visit KentuckyTourism.com. And then as I'm wrapping up, you see my email address there. Chanel McGee is our international sales director. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to her. But thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about Kentucky. I don't want to take too much time because I could keep talking about other parts of the state for a while. But since I don't have a bourbon, I'm gonna be quiet right now and turn it back over to Lynn.
Hey, Mike. Oh, gosh, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I learned so much myself. I mean, I didn't know about the sandstone arches. I didn't know about so much. What was the percentage of forest, did you say?
I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. I can't hear you, Lynn.
Yeah, it's good feedback. Just ask. Sorry, Kath, can you turn your sound off just for a moment? Yeah, it must be Kath. We'll try and work that out in a moment. So, Mike, yeah, what was the percentage of forest that you said? You had some staggering percentage.
Yeah, about 65% of Kentucky is forested.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, that's a message to get out as well. And a question from me, because I'm a horse lover. I'd clock the horse over your shoulder as well. So you said about the horse farms. Oh, gosh, yes. I want to go and visit those. Sounds amazing that you can go and visit them. And what about actual horse riding? Are there lots of opportunities for riding a horse yourself?
There are. I think in the video you saw the Red Barn Stables. There's opportunities for that. You can ride horses at the Kentucky Horse Park. There's actually farms and ranches here where if you own a horse, you can bring it and board it and ride as well. So yeah, there are certainly opportunities to ride horses. Many of our state parks, I didn't even mention our state parks. This year is the 100th anniversary of Kentucky State Parks. We have 17 resort parks spread throughout the state, all in outdoor settings, obviously. And most of the resort parks have, you can either rent boats, you can rent cabins, campgrounds, and go horseback riding.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I think so many of us, we hear all the tales about national parks in the States, but we don't always appreciate just how many state parks you've got and so on. And like I said,
we actually have 45 state parks, but 17 resort parks that you can visit and stay overnight.
Oh, incredible. And last but not least, before we hopefully get Kath back on, who's hopefully sorting out her sound issue, where was the moon bow you mentioned? Because can you tell us about that again? That sounded so intriguing.
That's at Cumberland Falls, which is right at one of our state parks, as a matter of fact. Cumberland Falls State Park, I don't know the exact number of acres, but it's substantial. So you can, and I've stayed there a number of times myself. They have cabins, they have a lodge, but really the highlight are the falls there. And you can kayak or take a boat right up underneath the falls. As a matter of fact, they do that in Fireside Fortune, so you can see that, and it's stunning. And as I said, it's one of only a few places in the northern hemisphere where you can see a moonbow when the conditions are right. So it has to be a full moon, has to be cloudless, But it's spectacular.
Oh, that sounds super special. Oh gosh, yeah, right. Really want to try that. Okay, let's just see if Kath can rejoin us. Yeah.
Hopefully. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. So,
Okay, good.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, tiny bit of feedback, but not just back. Okay, Kath, I'm just going to hand over to you then, who can tell us a bit more about how we can do this.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you, Mike. And good evening again. I'm Kath Pusey from America As You Like It. Hopefully Mike's, well, he's done the job for me, so it's going to make what I've got to say very easy. Hopefully he's inspired you all to book a holiday to Kentucky and the south of the USA. Just to tell you a little bit about ourselves, we are a UK-based tour operator. We've been around for over 25 years, and we specialise, as our name says, in tailor-made holidays across America and also in Canada. And our aim is to give you the holiday that you want to do rather than vice versa. So we really kind of take time to talk to you about what you want from your holiday, the things that interest you and inspire you to put together your own bespoke trip. And we've partnered, as Lynn said at the beginning, with Wanderlust and with Kentucky Tourism for many years. We feel like we know the state pretty well. We love it. I was really fortunate to first go to Kentucky in 2004 and go to the Kentucky Derby, which was an immense treat and a real bucket list experience. I rode on the governor's train to the Derby, or the Derby, as I should call it. And at that point, discovered my liking for bourbon and for mint juleps, which certainly hasn't got away. And I'm going to just chat you through a little bit of one of our popular holiday ideas for Kentucky. So you can kind of see a bit about what Mike's told you and how it all fit together and how you could do a holiday encompassing the sights, sips and sounds of Kentucky. The holiday idea is on our website, and in the follow-up you'll get a link to that and all sorts of other exciting Kentucky information. But really the state, as Mike's told you, has all of those things: historic attractions, stunning scenery, incredible food and drink, and of course the music. So it's all there. Regardless of your interests, you're sure to find something in Kentucky that you'd like. So just to talk you through what a 14-night holiday could look like. Obviously, we can tailor make it to include whatever you want to do. But at the beginning, you can fly direct from Heathrow into Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky Airport with British Airways. Spend a couple of nights there. You'll have plenty of time to stroll the Roebling Bridge, to visit some of the historic sites, some of the regional gastronomy, from the German beer kellers to fine dining to the Cincinnati chili, which is pictured there in the bottom corner. Really something unique to Northern Kentucky. And you can take a bourbon tour or distillery tour, brewery tour. We've got, we really recommend the gangster tour in Newport. Gives you a bit of history as to how the Newport area came to be, going back to the 1920s and Prohibition, and really what built the, how the original speakeasies came to be. So you spend 2 nights in Northern Kentucky. We've got some great hotels, the historic Hotel Covington, which has a fantastic restaurant and lively bar. We've got riverfront properties with skyline views and river views. So there's plenty of options there for your first couple of nights to get yourselves adjusted. And you pick up your car and head off through the state. And in this holiday idea, your next stop is going to be Lexington, as we've heard, horse farm capital of the world. Great thing about a holiday to Kentucky is that the driving distances are relatively small. So it's easy to get from one place to the next. There's plenty of places to stop and see things on the way as well. So a short drive down to Lexington for another 2 nights. And here in Lexington, you can, as Lynn mentioned and Mike's mentioned, you can do a horse farm tour and really understand and get an insight into why the equine industry is such a big part of Kentucky, and how important it is. You can go racing at Keeneland, as Mike said, was his favourite racetrack. My favourite bit about the racing at Keeneland was definitely the Keeneland Breeze cocktails. So definitely, if you go to Keeneland, make sure you try a Keeneland Breeze cocktail, of course made with bourbon, because you're on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in Lexington. There's plenty of places both downtown and in the distillery district where you can try different bourbons. James E. Pepper is definitely one to recommend. The city also has some fantastic dining. And a great way to see the city is on a walking foodie tour. We work with a company called Bites of Bluegrass, and they provide an excellent walking tour to tell you a little bit about the history of Lexington, about the architecture and how it grew up to the city it is today. You stop off at various different restaurants, cafes, bars, to sample all sorts of different cuisine while you're learning about the city. So all good. Again, we have some really good hotels in Lexington. Mike showed a picture earlier on of the 21C Museum Hotel in Louisville. There's also one in Lexington, along with the Sire Hotel, the Campbell. So some really unique properties that give you kind of a sense and flavour of what Kentucky and the South is all about. So a couple of nights in Lexington, and then you're going to head off into the countryside a little bit. So down into the Renfrew Valley. The road that you're going to take is known as the Country Music Highway. And it's designated one of America's unique national byways. And it really, you'll travel through some stunning scenery, lots of famous musicians have called this area home, and you'll really see why, with the rolling hills, small towns, a couple of state parks where you can stop, do some hiking or some walking, or just take in the outdoors. There's also a museum on the Country Music Highway in Paintsville, so it's another good opportunity to really learn what makes this bluegrass music and country music so unique to Kentucky. Head on then from Renfrew Valley to Bardstown. As we've heard, bourbon capital of the world. I don't think I probably need to say too much more than that, but you can do tours, a variety of different tours from Bardstown through the different distilleries, and they all have a really unique take on it. So not one distillery tour is the same as the next, which makes it really interesting. Bardstown, as Mike said, is also voted the most beautiful small town in the US. And as you can see from the bottom picture there, has a really beautiful scenic, beautiful historic downtown area, lots of local shops and restaurants, cafes. And the great thing about Kentucky as a whole, and particularly this area, is that you really do find authentic America. So you don't really find the big chains that you see in other parts of the US. There's lots of emphasis on local entrepreneurship and local restaurants and that kind of thing. For a different kind of dining experience from Bardstown, you can take the My Old Kentucky Home dinner train, and that will take you through some rolling countryside, so you can sit and look out of the window while you sip on a bourbon cocktail and enjoy a 3-course meal. So that's another really nice opportunity that we can book for you. And then from Bardstown, you can head and include a couple of things that Mike's just mentioned. Mammoth Cave National Park, which you've seen is the longest underground cave system, not just in America, but in the world. And the different tours which you can take, depending on how claustrophobic you feel or not, but some easy walking tours into the caves, or some more extreme ones as well. And the whole of the park actually also has opportunities for kayaking, for canoeing, hiking, and there are also horse riding tours that you can do there. So, Lynn, this is a place for you. It's got some horse riding tours there as well. And the Corvette Museum and Factory, as we've just heard about, is also in this area, close to Bowling Green. And it is the only place, as Mike said, where the Corvette is manufactured. And if you're lucky enough, you'll be able to see new owners collecting their car. When I was there last year, we got the opportunity to watch people driving off for the first time in their brand new shiny Corvettes. Bit out of my price range, but it's definitely an experience to see people do that. But you can also learn all about the history of the iconic Corvette at the museum. See lots of different makes and model, well, not makes, lots of different models of Corvettes from over the years. So it's a fascinating stop as well, and something again uniquely Kentucky. And from this point, and I shouldn't really mention it, but Mike did, so I can say that. If you really want to visit, if you're music fans amongst you, then to visit Nashville and Memphis really fits very well with this part of the holiday. So you can hop across the state line into Tennessee, spend a couple of nights in both Nashville and Memphis, and then you can loop back round up into Western Kentucky, where your next stops are going to be Paducah and Owensboro. And these are both river towns on the western side of the state. And Paducah, as Mike mentioned, is a UNESCO Creative City and home to the National Quilt Museum. And it is a bit bizarre when I first heard about it to think that a city would have a museum dedicated to quilts. But really, they are quite incredible, and all the detail, painstaking detail that goes into making them something quite incredible. And all the different designs, you can spend hours there just marveling at the creations. But something also fairly unique to Paducah is the Hotel Metropolitan. If you've seen the film The Green Book, you'll know about the Chitlin Circuit, where black entertainers were able to perform in certain clubs and theatres and other venues where they couldn't do elsewhere. And the Hotel Metropolitan was featured in the Green Book as somewhere where these black entertainers could stay in a safe and comfortable environment. And so Paducah Hotel Metropolitan has played host to Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, the Harlem Globetrotters even. Many people have stayed there, and really run by an incredible lady. So if you get the chance to tour the Hotel Metropolitan in Paducah, she's quite a character. So you have a night there in Paducah, and then on up the river to Owensboro. We've already seen the Bluegrass Hall of Fame and Museum, and they have live music there every Friday and Saturday. But if you're not there on a Friday or Saturday, you can pick up a banjo or pick up a fiddle and try plucking for yourself. And speaking from experience, it's not as easy as it looks, but it's still great to be able to have that hands-on experience. There's plenty of live music venues, bars and restaurants in the downtown area. Some fantastic Western Kentucky barbecue. So this is where you'll find the Moonlight Barbecue Inn, which on my last trip to Kentucky sampled the signature mutton barbecue, which was really fantastic. When I got a secret behind the scenes tour to where the barbecue pits are. It's not your average barbecue. These things were enormous and took up an entire industrial sized building, but really quite a unique thing to see and do. And two very different places on your trip through Western Kentucky. And then your holiday, last stops in your holiday are in Louisville, as Mike would say, or I would say Louisville. Home, of course, to the Kentucky Derby and Churchill Downs, where the races run every, I think it's the last weekend of April, the first weekend of May every year. But also home to plenty of other races throughout the season. And if you're not there during racing season, you can still visit the Kentucky Derby Museum, which really gives you the feeling of being there on race day. The sounds and the sights and smells of what it's like. The other not to miss attractions, as we've heard, Muhammad Ali Center and the Slugger Museum. Louisville is also boasts the Urban Bourbon Trail. So you really don't need to wander too far to sample various brands of bourbon on the Urban Bourbon Trail. last time I was there, I bought some Angel's Envy. And now all my friends are asking me when I'm going back to Kentucky again to stock up on some more. So that's certainly well worth trying. And even if you don't think you like bourbon, for anything like me, after you've had a few sips of your first one, you'll be a convert. So great experience in Louisville. And again, we have some good hotel options there. The 21C Hotel, which we saw in Mike's images, but also the landmark Brown Hotel, which is listed on the National Historic Register, and is somewhere that in the 1920s they invented the Kentucky Hot Brown, which is a late night snack that will see you through the night, which when all the 1920s revelers were living it up, they'd stop and have a Kentucky Hot Brown. Very unique combination of bread, turkey, tomatoes, bacon, and cheese sauce, but actually works really well. So if you want something, again, uniquely Kentucky, find that at the Historic Brown Hotel in Louisville. So that really brings your holiday to an end. From Louisville, it's just a short drive back up to Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky Airport, for your flight home. So it's giving you a bit of a loop of the state. And as I said at the beginning, we can tailor-make the holiday to suit exactly what you want to do. But Kentucky really does have it all: food, drink, history, scenery, outdoor adventure, so whatever. And great southern hospitality. So whatever you're looking for in a holiday, I think you'll find it in Kentucky. And just as a follow-up, you'll get all this information in an email. I'm sure it'll be on the Wanderlust website as well. But we do really pride ourselves in giving everybody the holiday that they want. So we can 100% tailor-make your holiday to include whatever you want to do. As I said, I've been to Kentucky many times, as several of my colleagues. We specialise in the US and really know what will suit all types of people. And we work with some great people locally, reliable partners that we have, that we've worked with for many years in the US. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you'll book your holiday to Kentucky in the very near future. If you've got questions or queries, you can go to our website, you can send us an email, you can give us a call, you can put them in the chat tonight. And we look forward to hearing from you. Many thanks.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Kath. Oh, gosh. Yeah, some great stuff there. And I loved that photo of Bardstown as well, which obviously Mike had mentioned as well, that it won most beautiful town. I mean, that just looks beautiful. Are the other towns also very attractive?
Each and every one.
Go on, Mike.
I said each and every one of them. Every town we have is pretty.
No, they look great.
He might be biased, but he's right. Okay,
they are actually attractive small towns. Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah. We've got a number. And I have to be honest, I'm partial to Bardstown. I was actually the tourism director there for a couple of years. And they have really added a number of hotels now, some new restaurants locally, because it is still a small town. And the entire downtown is actually on the National Register of Historic Places. So they really keep things very traditional, but a lot of new activities coming on there. And many of our smaller towns, I'm here in Frankfort, which is our state capital. And literally about a quarter of a mile down the road is Buffalo Trace, the most visited distillery in Kentucky. But also, we've got one of the most beautiful state capitals in the country, in my opinion. It's actually modeled. It's a scale replica, if you will, of the U.S. Capitol in D.C. So that's one of the great things about Kentucky is Kath said, it's easy to drive, it's easy to get around.
Yeah.
Some beautiful back roads, not just all interstate, some beautiful back roads. Yeah. And that's where you kind of run into some of these towns. Midway's another great example, which is between here and Lexington. And it's literally 2 streets with a train track going down the middle and some of the best restaurants and shopping in Kentucky.
Oh, that sounds so enticing. That sounds more and more appealing. And Mike, what's your favorite cocktail?
I have really gotten, I would say one or two. The old fashioned right? The old fashioned was actually created in Louisville, Kentucky by a African American bartender named Tom Bullock. He was the first African American to write a book about cocktails. I would say the old fashioned, and it's very simple. But I've really kind of gotten into Boulevardiers recently as well. So a Boulevardier, if you think, and I never say this right, if you think of a Negroni, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, we know Negroni.
It's basically a bourbon. You switch out the gin or with bourbon.
Oh, wow. There you go, Kath. One for you to try next time if you haven't tried that yet. Sounds really good. Now, sadly, we are out of time, and YouTube must have been so comprehensive that we haven't actually got any questions. But unless I miss it. Oh, no, we have. Hang on a second. Sorry. I'm looking in the wrong place. Somebody making a point. There is sort of an alternative to the Bourbon Trail. Any advice on how to weave the smaller stellar distilleries in with the visits to the Bourbon Trail distilleries?
Sure. I think they're probably referencing the Beeline in northern Kentucky, which is a series of distilleries in the Newport, Covington area, and New Riff Distilling, which is, again, in that Newport area, which is a great experience. Now they have Bourbon County Distillery, but the Beeline is also a part of that includes restaurants and bars who have a certain number of bourbons on their bar, so that you can try many of those. But it's actually very simple to incorporate. Both those distilleries I mentioned, Bourbon County and New Riff, are on the Bourbon Trail. So the Bourbon Trail now spreads throughout the state. It's not just centralized in the Lexington and Louisville and Frankfort area. Technically, Buffalo Trace isn't even on the Bourbon Trail because they're not a part of the organization that owns the trademark. But it doesn't matter. People incorporate that. And actually, if you've been to any of our large distilleries in the past, I would encourage you to go find some of these smaller, off the beaten path distilleries. As I mentioned, in Franklin, Kentucky, there's Dueling Grounds. There's just so many now. I'm going blank on all of them. But yeah, it's very easy to incorporate those. Okay,
fabulous. And we'll mention that then, the Beeline, in the follow-up email. Luxie has asked the best time to go, please. Mike mentioned September, October. Yeah, would you? Is there a particular reason why? And I think, Kath, you're nodding your head as well.
I mean, Mike will speak better to this, but I would say, in terms of getting the best value for money and it not being too super hot as it can be in July and August, then April, May, particularly if you're into the horses and the horse racing. But equally September, October, some great autumn colours we've seen. It's not just in Vermont. Kentucky does have a lot of lovely autumn colours. So
65% of the state being forest. I can imagine. Wow.
So your question is February, March timeframe. I of course I have to say this. I think coming at any time of the year. I will tell you, February, March, we do get winter here. They've been relatively mild last couple of years, but it can be cold. But the distilleries are open. What you're missing primarily there, as I said, we have horse racing. Those are at that time of year. It's at our smaller tracks, but most of the other attractions are still open. And as I said, it can be very mild here in March, or it can be snowing. But February, March is still a great time to come. Actually, in at that time period, one of our bigger bourbon events, the Bourbon Classic, is held in Louisville, and there's always local festivals and events happening throughout the year.
Okay, great. Talking of events, Mary's asked, are there any major special events, anniversaries, new attractions opening next year?
Oh gosh, next year, off the top of my head, I can't count. We have a lot of new hotels opening in the next few months and into next year. As far as events, I can't really think of any major new events. We just came off of the PGA Championship in Louisville 2 weeks after the Derby, so it's been a very, very busy month. But we can get a list and send to you and follow up with all the new upcoming events for 2025.
Yeah, well, again, I'm sure we could always do a relevant link or something in the follow-up email. Now, interesting question from Henry. What's the origin of the name?
Of Kentucky?
Presumably.
The origin.
Say, do you know?
the name Kentucky is an Indian name, and it's been there's discussion on the name. Some people say it was means dark and bloody ground, because as the settlers came in, there were a lot of battles with the Native Americans who were living here. Daniel Boone's family members, some of those, Rebecca Boone was actually kidnapped by some Native Americans. So it has Native American origins.
Yeah. Okay. It was an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we have really, really, really seriously run out of time now. So I think just to wrap up, and for a final thing, this is always a cruel question, but if there's just one thing, you've got us all excited about the state. Both of you have covered a lot of ground in that. So what would be your one recommendation that anybody watching should do? Just one, if you have to pick just one. Kath, do you want to go first?
Oh, so difficult, but I would say the Mammoth Cave National Park for myself. There's so many amazing opportunities in the state, but that was one of the hidden gems for me the first time I went, was to experience that and to go down under the ground. And especially after a few nights of bourbon drinking, it was really good to be outside and in the fresh air and in a national park.
Yeah, sure. The UNESCO World Heritage Site at that. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, Mike.
Oh, I don't know that I can pick one. But if you want iconic Kentucky, if you want thrills and fun, do the Corvette and drive the Corvette on the test track. If you want truly iconic Kentucky, if you want to see the image that's on your screen right now, have some bourbon, go to Keeneland in October. Spend the weekend in Lexington and Central Kentucky in October. Do some distilleries, visit some horse farms, have some great food, do some of that horse racing. And I think that would truly, yes, the pun is intended, distill Kentucky down in a short period.
Sounds brilliant. Okay, well, thank you both. That was so enjoyable and very, very inspiring. So, yes, thank you to everybody still with us. We will be sending out that follow-up, Elon, with the recording, so you can always watch a bit of it again. But we'll put some of those recommendations and so on in there as well, so you have the names and anything else useful that we can think of, and, of course, a link to America As You Like It's trip, which their sort of suggested itinerary, which sounds really good, really, really good. Okay, thank you so much to Kath. Thank you so much to Mike. That was brilliant. Really enjoyed it. And thank you all for watching. Good night. Good night.
Bye.